Hi everyone, welcome to Live Interactive English. I'm Mike.
And I'm Karen. Today we're looking at part 2 of sweating is actually a human superpower. And like we said, a lot of animals can't really sweat, right?
It's true.
And we know sweating is how we survive. But how about the animals? Where do they, give off their heat?
Yeah, it's kind of unusual because you'd think that we're mammals, right? We're warm-blooded animals. We sweat, but a lot of other mammals don't. Of course, dogs, as I think most people know, they pant. They do that thing where they stick their tongue out, they breathe a lot. The best way they can cool down is really to drink water.
Oh, you're right.
But when they can, they will pant, but they don't sweat.
Really? But
Yeah.
Another interesting animal that I found was that kangaroos. Do you know how they give off their heat
Well,
or how they keep themselves cool?
They live in Australia, which is a hot place, so they have to have, I don't know. I've never seen a kangaroo sweat or pant, or what do?
They lick their forearms. And then the moisture will kind of, let out the heat in their body and then let it go. And then so it wouldn't be actually that hot. This is how they stay cool, licking their forearms.
Kind of cool. I guess if you can't sweat, you can still get water on your skin, and it'll do the same thing that our sweat does. Another one that I know is elephants, right?
Ooh.
Elephants are famous for their big ears. Well, those ears are actually how they cool down. They use their ears, they put blood through those big ears, and then kind of like fans, the ears just let that heat go, and that keeps their whole body cool.
Is that why they're always moving their ears back and forth?
It's partly to keep the cooler air moving around the blood, cool off the blood, and also cool off their body. So very, very interesting ways for all of these animals, which are similar in lots of ways, but how they handle the heat can be really, really unique and unusual. And that's why humans sweat, and we're calling it a superpower. So let's read our second part of the article, and we'll find out more all about it.
Let's go.
Sweating isn't limited to time spent out in the sun. We actually have two different types of sweat glands. One, the kind on most parts of our bodies, releases water and salt, and it's the kind that cools us the most. The other, found on hairy parts of the body, is activated by emotional reactions. The sweat from this type of gland contains a substance that acts as a pheromone and is usually produced when we're under stress.
At part 2 of sweating is actually a human superpower today, right?
That's right, yeah.
In part 1, we already learned some things about sweating and how it helps us. Okay, well, let's learn more. Sweating isn't limited to time spent out in the sun. We actually have two different types of sweat glands. Okay, so more than one. We have two different types. One, the kind on most parts of our bodies, releases water and salt. And it's the kind that cools us the most.
Okay, that's the one we would expect. If you're exercising, the sweat will come down your face, be on your arms, pretty much anywhere on your body. And that's the sweat that, of course, has water and salt from our bodies, and that's the one that also cools us as it settles on our skin, right? It cools off the skin, but that's why it's important to drink water and things like that when you're hot. Now, what's the other type of sweat gland?
Well, you're gonna tell us.
And how does it work? Well, it says, the other, found on hairy parts of the body, especially the top of your head, I would imagine, is activated by emotional reactions.
Emotional reactions.
Interesting. So if you're suddenly under stress, if you're embarrassed, if you tell a lie and someone catches you and you feel very emotional. You feel these strong feelings. Emotions are feelings. Emotional is the adjective we use to talk about things that are kind of controlled or related to or about feelings. If you have an emotional reaction, that means what you're doing is because of your feelings at that time. If someone tells you some terrible news and you instantly start crying, that's an emotional reaction. You didn't even think this is sad. It just happened because of your feelings, because of your emotions. For example, as a parent, you must listen to the emotional needs of your children as opposed to their other needs, right?
That's right, and that's very important, right? Because if you understand their emotional needs, then they're more easily to calm down.
Yeah, now we have other needs like the need for sleep or the need for
Physical
food.
needs.
Physical needs, right? But emotional needs are more about being a happy person.
Absolutely. And reaction is our next vocabulary word, and that is a noun. Reaction basically just means how you act or how you feel when something happens. So, for example, the employees had an angry reaction to the policy change. So, their reaction to the policy change, they feel maybe strongly about it. They feel very, very angry. So, they acted angry, right?
Yeah, that was definitely an emotional reaction too. That emotion was anger. All right, back to the article. Let's find out about this other type of sweating, this emotional sweating. The sweat from this type of gland contains a substance that acts as a pheromone and is usually produced when we're under stress. Okay, so this is emotional, right? When you're under stress, when you're nervous, when suddenly there's a lot of pressure on you, that will affect your feelings, your emotions, and you'll produce sweat, which of course is water, but there will also be other substances in that sweat, including pheromones. Now, what is a substance? Basically, it's something that's in another thing. When we talk about the ingredients of something, when we talk about how different things are made, people might make something in a different way depending on where they're from or their style. And basically, the things that they put in are different substances, okay? Could be ingredients in food, could be something that's in a medicine, or it could be something you find that you don't even know what it is. What is this substance? It's some kind of thing, but I don't know what it's made of. For example, when rubber is burned, it sends dangerous substances into the air. In
That could
case,
be poisonous, right?
Yeah, those substances would be chemicals of some kind.
Wow, we learned quite a lot about sweat, right? Do you feel you sweat when you're feeling nervous?
Maybe if I'm suddenly really embarrassed or something, yeah, I might start sweating on my head or something. I don't know. It's one of those things you don't notice it because you're so busy doing other things, right?
You're
Having
right.
this emotional reaction, you might not notice suddenly that your hands are wet or something.
Maybe
like
where
that.
you're giving a speech in front of a big,
yeah.
large audience, you might feel you might sweat, right?
For
Because you feel
sure.
you're under a lot of stress and pressure.
Exactly. When we're encouraging someone in a difficult situation, we might say, never let them see you sweat. Never show the stress and the pressure. Look calm and cool, even if inside you're covered in sweat. We're going to take a break and we'll be back with more.
See you soon.
Hello， 大家好，我是 Hanny。每个人全身上下有200万到500万个汗腺。那么汗腺有2种不同类型，一种是遍布在身体大部分的部位，就会释放出水跟盐分，这是最能让我们降温的那一种。而另一种呢，则是在身体多毛的部位，它会受到情绪反应而起作用。那这种腺体的汗液当中含有一种作为费洛蒙的物质，通常呢是在我们处于压力之下会产生的。好，文中的 pheromone 就是动情激素，常常就会音译为费洛蒙。而单字 emotional 它是形容情绪的、情绪上的，或是激起强烈情感的。那么 reaction 它是名词，有反应、回应的意思。Substance 则是指物质，是个名词。那这边一个重点，我们进入文法时间。好，我们这边来学分列句的用法。分列句是把原句要强调的部分摆在 it is 跟 that 之间，或者是 it was 跟 that 之间。那强调的部分呢，可以是原句当中的主词、受词、时间片语，或者是地方副词片语等等。那我们接着呢，你可以把原句中的其他部分摆在 that 后面。这个句型就是 it is 或是 it was 加上强调的部分，加上 that 再加句子的其他部分。举例来说 ，The song reminded them of their wedding day。那这时候如果用分列句去强调主词 the song， 句子就可以写作 It was the song that reminded them of their wedding day， 是那首歌让他们想起婚礼的那一天。好，另外我们也可以用分列句来强调 not until 加上名词或接子句去表达直到点点点才怎么样。举例来说 ，The power didn't come back on until 2 a.m. 如果我们用分列句来强调 not until 2 a.m. 这个句子就会写作 It wasn't until 2 a.m. that the power came back on. 直到凌晨2点，电力才恢复。接华课文中。
Surprisingly, neither of these sweat types has a smell when they're first released. It isn't until they mix with bacteria on our skin that they produce a bad smell. That smell changes based on your diet and age. People who eat lots of onions, garlic, or similar vegetables often have smellier sweat, and so do older people. Older people sweat less, however, which makes them more sensitive to heat. Other things like our genes, environment, and fitness level affect how much we sweat. On average, though, we each sweat over 2,000 liters a year, enough to fill 10 bathtubs. So, make sure you drink enough water to keep your sweaty superpower ready for action.
Welcome back, everyone. So we're back to learn more about sweat, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Surprisingly, neither of these sweat types has a smell when they're first released. It isn't until they mix with bacteria on our skin that they produce a bad smell. Because oftentimes when we see people like athletes, when they're sweating, and then when you're around them or around teenagers, and then you'll feel like, oh no, they're sweating, it's going to smell really, really bad. It's not because the sweat itself that smells. It's because the sweat is mixed with the bacteria on our skin. That's why it's making it smell bad.
Interesting. I mean, that's a good point. If you go out on a hot day and you start to sweat, if you smell your skin, you won't smell anything.
Exactly.
Because that's clean. Now, if you didn't wash for a day or whatever, then yes, the bacteria would build up, and it's bacteria on our bodies that can make us have those dirty body smells, not the actual sweat. In this case, bacteria, well, yeah, it's basically a very small, simple living thing. Much smaller than plants or insects, much more simple than that. Bacteria can reproduce because they are living things. And when we think of bacteria, we often think of bad things that we might get in our body, dirty things that might make us sick or cause an infection, right? If you cut your finger or something, you should wash your hands with soap and water to kill the bacteria. In the same way that we were being told to wash our hands to stop viruses like COVID-19. Now, viruses and bacteria are a little bit different from a scientific point of view, but for people normally, we think of these as things that we don't want to get in us or on us. They might cause sickness or illness or something. They're dirty in some kind of way. But there are good bacteria, like the ones in our stomach, that keep your stomach nice and happy and working well. But bacteria in this case, yeah, it's not so good. It's a little dirty. You'd probably want to wash. Let's have a look at the example sentence for that word. Wash your hands often to stop the spread of bacteria.
And that's very true. That's why we always have to wash our hands before we eat, or else we'll be getting the bacteria in our body, and that will possibly make us really, really sick, right?
It's the same thing that we're getting off our clothes. When we wash our clothes with soap, this clothes smell good. Then when we wear them, they don't smell dirty anymore because we've washed that bacteria away. Now, back to the sweat and bacteria and where that smell can come from. That smell, the smell of sweat and dirty bodies, that smell changes based on your diet and age.
Oh, so that means that maybe if you're older, you will smell it a little bit more, or maybe you're younger, you'll smell a little bit more.
Or just differently.
Oh, okay.
You know, I mean, I guess it makes sense. As you get older, your body changes. Why wouldn't your sweat and other things change? And there are things you can do as well to change the smell of your sweat. It says people who eat lots of onions, garlic, or similar vegetables often have smellier sweat.
No.
And so do older people.
But I love garlic and I love onions in every single dish.
Well, I guess that's okay, but if you suddenly show up and someone says, hey, you had onions, you might think, oh, maybe I'm having a few too many onions.
Or maybe you're having like a garlic breath or something.
Yeah, if it's coming out in your sweat, maybe you should cut down. But I think for most people, if you're not eating garlic with every meal and you do wash regularly, you should be fine. Enjoy that garlic bread.
Okay, older people sweat less, however, which makes them more sensitive to heat. Okay, so if they sweat less, that means they're not letting out that heat as easily, right? So they're a little more sensitive. So which means they probably, younger people will probably sweat a little bit more.
I've never seen a sweaty old man.
Never?
Well, I just can't picture a sweaty old man.
Like an old man dancing or exercising?
Oh, yeah, I guess so. But this, of course, is another reason why when it is very hot in the summer, we're told to really look out for old people, right? They can really get in trouble with the extra heat when it's 40 degrees in the summer and things like that, because their bodies don't control heat by sweating as much as we do. So little babies and old people outside on a sunny, hot day, they really need to be careful. Yeah.
Okay, so we were talking about the age, but also your diet matters too, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, if you eat a lot of stuff like onions and also garlic, you would probably smell a little bit worse.
Smelly food makes smelly sweat? I guess it makes sense.
That's right. And onion is our next vocabulary word, and that is a noun. So onion is basically a kind of vegetable that is round, a little bit pointy at the top, and when you're cutting it, when it's raw, it will usually kind of bring out tears in your eyes, right?
Yep.
But I have to say, it tastes great when you cook with onions. So for example, Nancy grows onion, carrot, and cabbage in her garden. So I guess she probably doesn't need to go to the supermarket to buy a lot of vegetables.
She could make a salad very easily. That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah, people love onions. They can have a strong smell, strong flavor. If you cook them, it's not quite so strong. But yeah, they are famous for being quite smelly too, especially uncooked. Other things like our genes, environment, and fitness level affect how much we sweat. Okay, I guess if you work out, depending on where you're from, your family history, that's your genes. Maybe people in your family just sweat more than other people do. Those are some of the things we're born with and we get from our parents and grandparents. On average, though, we each sweat over 2,000 liters a year.
Wow.
And to give you an idea of how much 2,000 liters is, enough to fill 10 bathtubs.
That's really hard to imagine, right?
What, a bath full of sweat? Yes, it is. Especially taking a bath in that bathtub full of, oh! But you're right, that is a lot. 10, I mean, that's a lot of liquid. Or you think about drinking 10,000 1-liter bottles of water.
But then again, that's in a whole year.
That is a whole year,
right?
That's true.
Okay, so make sure you drink enough water to keep your sweaty superpower ready for action. And that is definitely true. We know that you definitely have to drink enough water in order to sweat.
Yes, you do, especially here in Taiwan where it can get so hot. And they say even if you're thirsty, you've already sweat out too much water.
You're right.
It's really good to do that, to keep your body working right. Here's our what do you think question. Do you tend to sweat a lot? How do you deal with it?
Do you tend to sweat a lot?
Well, when it's hot, I said in the humid, hot summers I do. I deal with it by trying to stay in air conditioning, have a towel with me, wear the right clothes. There's things you can do to make it better, just like when it's really cold in Canada in the winter. There's things you can do to make it easier for your body. But it can be, a little bit challenging on those super hot days in Taiwan.
That's right, but don't forget, that's our superpower, right?
That's true, that's true. Maybe I'll wear a cape next time, like a superhero. And it can keep me cool as well as it flaps.
That's right. Okay, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you guys next time.
Stay cool, everyone.
其实汗液最初释放的时候没有气味，直到跟皮肤上的细菌混合才会产生难闻气味。那这种气味就会根据饮食还有年龄而变化。像吃大量洋葱、大蒜或类似蔬菜的人，通常汗就会比较臭，而老年人也是如此。而其他像基因啊、环境、健康程度等等，也会影响到出汗量。那既然流汗不可避免，同学们就要确保自己要补充足够的水分哦。好，我们的单字 bacteria。 它是指细菌。那这个字其实是 bacterium 的复数形。而说到细菌繁殖 ，Mike 老师用到 reproduce， 在 produce 前面加上 re， 构成这个动词，它就有繁殖、繁衍的意思。下一个单字 onion， 它表示洋葱。那这边2个重点，我们进入文法时间。好，我们来看这个重点是 neither of。它是表达两者都没有怎么样。其中这个 neither 或者是有人念作 neither， 它表示两者皆非。那么当代名词的时候视为单数，必须搭配单数动词。那如果我们是用 neither of 加上复数名词，用这样去当主词的话，在正式用法当中会搭配单数动词。举例来说 ，Neither of us is going to the party。我们2个人都没有要去参加派对。那我们中间用 is， 这时候它是正式用法。如果呢，我们用非正式谈话或写作当中呢，它就有可能会用到 are 去表达咯。好，那我们接着看到下一个重点是 so 加上助动词或 be 动词加主词去表达什么什么也是。那这个用法呢是用来附和前面的肯定句。那如果前面是否定句，你要表达什么什么也不是，这时候我们就会把 so 去改成 neither。好，我们来看2个例句 ：Reading is relaxing, and so is listening to music。阅读很令人放松，听音乐也是。好，再看个例句 ：Eddie has never been to Europe, and neither has Lily。Eddie 他不曾去过欧洲 ，Lily 他也不曾去过。好，那么以上是今天的讲解，同学别走开，马上回来哦。
Sweating isn't limited to time spent out in the sun. We actually have 2 different types of sweat glands. One, the kind on most parts of our bodies, releases water and salt, and it's the kind that cools us the most. The other, found on hairy parts of the body, is activated by emotional reactions. The sweat from this type of gland contains a substance that acts as a pheromone and is usually produced when we're under stress. Surprisingly, neither of these sweat types has a smell when they're first released. It isn't until they mix with bacteria on our skin that they produce a bad smell. That smell changes based on your diet and age. People who eat lots of onions, garlic, or similar vegetables often have smellier sweat, and so do older people. Older people sweat less, however, which makes them more sensitive to heat. Other things like our genes, environment, and fitness level affect how much we sweat. On average, though, we each sweat over 2,000 liters a year, enough to fill 10 bathtubs. So, make sure you drink enough water to keep your sweaty superpower ready for action.
Hi everyone, I'm Steven. I am at the Hsinchu Science Park. I'm going to explore what's inside the park. Let's go check it out. The Hsinchu Science Park is the first science park in Taiwan. It was built in the 1980s and was initially proposed by Mr. Hsinchu, the former chairman of the Industrial Technology Research Institute. The purpose of the park is to boost Taiwan's technology development and industrial exchange. The park is 686 hectares, crossing Hsinchu City and Hsinchu County. There are more than 560 companies and 150,000 people working here. Some industries that can be found here include semiconductor, optoelectronics, computers and peripherals, and telecommunications. Besides the high-tech environment, the park also features many places for leisure. There is a big lake, tennis court, swimming pool, golf course, restaurants, and more. The Hsinchu Science Park is a place that combines technology with human culture.
See you next time!